The greatest weapon in the Cold War wasn't a bomb, it was a story. For decades, the idea that the CIA secretly influenced American news outlets was dismissed as a wild conspiracy theory. Yet, the shadows of the Cold War often concealed truths far stranger than fiction, and the intelligence agencies on both sides were masters of psychological warfare. It wasn't about direct censorship in the traditional sense. Instead, the allegations surrounding Operation Mockingbird painted a picture of a more subtle, insidious form of control, shaping public perception through the very information channels Americans trusted most. The name Operation Mockingbird itself never officially existed as a CIA program. It emerged from investigative journalism and congressional inquiries, becoming a shorthand for a complex web of alleged covert relationships between the agency and the press. The roots of these alleged operations stretch back to the immediate post-World War Roman II era. The nascent Central Intelligence Agency, formed in 1947, quickly recognized the immense power of information in the ideological struggle against the Soviet Union. Psychological warfare, or PSYOPs, became a cornerstone of Cold War strategy. The goal wasn't just to gather intelligence, but to influence minds, both abroad and at home, ensuring public support for U.S. foreign policy. One key figure in bringing these allegations to light was investigative journalist Carl Bernstein, famous for his Watergate reporting. In 1977, Bernstein published a lengthy article in *Rolling Stone* titled "The CIA and the Media." Bernstein's piece alleged that over 400 American journalists had secretly carried out assignments for the CIA over the previous 25 years. These weren't just stringers or freelancers. They included Pulitzer Prize winners and executives at major news organizations. The article claimed the CIA had covert relationships with media giants like CBS, *The New York Times*, *Time*, *Magazine, and others. The agency allegedly used these connections to disseminate propaganda, plant stories, and gather intelligence. These allegations were not entirely new. Back in 1975, Senator Frank Church's committee investigating intelligence abuses touched upon similar issues. The Church Committee found that the CIA had indeed used journalists and media outlets for covert purposes. The committee's report stated, "The CIA maintained a variety of covert relationships with U.S. journalists and news organizations. However, it often avoided naming specific individuals or media outlets publicly, citing national security concerns." One of the most well-known examples often cited is the case of Gloria Steinem. It was revealed that Steinem had worked for a CIA-funded organization in the late 1950s and early 1960s, prior to her fame as a feminist icon. However, Steinem maintained she was unaware of the CIA's involvement at the time, believing she was working for a legitimate student organization. This highlights the often unwitting role some individuals may have played in these larger schemes. Another alleged connection involved Cord Meyer, a prominent CIA official who was married to Mary Pinchot Meyer, a close friend of Jacqueline Kennedy. Cord Meyer was reportedly instrumental in using students and intellectuals for CIA covert operations. The CIA's rationale for these activities was simple: counter Soviet propaganda and win the hearts and minds of people worldwide. In a global ideological battle, controlling the narrative was seen as paramount. The agency often argued that the media, by its very nature, was a conduit for information, and if that information could serve national security interests, it should be utilized. The lines between journalism and espionage became dangerously blurred. Critics, however, argued that such tactics fundamentally undermined the credibility of a free press, a cornerstone of American democracy. If the public couldn't trust their news sources, then the very fabric of informed discourse was at risk. The revelations about CIA media involvement led to significant internal reforms within the agency. In 1976, Director George H.W. Bush issued a directive prohibiting the CIA from using American journalists for intelligence purposes. This directive, however, did not explicitly ban the use of foreign journalists, and questions remained about the extent to which these prohibitions were truly enforced, or if loopholes were exploited in the decades that followed. The legacy of Operation Mockingbird is complex. On one hand, the CIA acknowledges that it did have relationships with journalists. On the other, the scale and nature of these operations remain a subject of intense debate and speculation. Some argue that the allegations were overblown, a sensationalized account of routine intelligence gathering. Others maintain that the true extent of media manipulation remains hidden, an uncomfortable truth about Cold War tactics. What is clear is that the perceived threat of communist ideology led intelligence agencies to adopt methods that, in hindsight, tested the boundaries of democratic principles and public trust. The story of Operation Mockingbird serves as a potent reminder of the delicate balance between national security and the preservation of a free, independent press. A balance that, even today, is frequently challenged. The full truth of the CIA's alleged secret influence on American media may never be completely known, shrouded as it is in layers of secrecy and the passage of time. But the questions it raised continue to echo. Understanding this chapter helps us better grasp the complexities of information warfare in our modern era. The tools may change, but the strategic intent to shape perception remains constant. Explore another fascinating Cold War secret by clicking the video on your screen.